I wrote a piece this week. Man, it's been rare. I've been able to share a piece I wrote this week. I wrote a piece this week called AI in Gaming Has Flopped. And what I argue in the piece is that we have been at the subsidization stage of AI for gaming. I mean, we basically have kept NVIDIA alive for as long as it has been by gamers basically just buying video cards and creating demand for 3D graphics. And a lot of what AI has unlocked is because we've subsidized this company for decades after decades. And yet we haven't been able, I would argue, to be on the frontier of this technology. I would argue that the basic implementation of AI in gaming right now, at least from a front end consumer perspective, is chatbots and press releases from Cosmic Lounge on match 3 levels that we still haven't seen get delivered yet. And it gets even worse when you think about like how much AI progress has been made and yet hasn't been made in gaming. And then you compare that to Web3. Like Web3 seems to have made more progress in gaming than AI has. And when you think about gaming historically, and when you talk to VCs, specifically about Web3, one of the things that VCs will instantly tell you is that gaming is the first and best use case and helps drive mass customer adoption. They love to tell you that fact. And yet we haven't seen that be the case in AI, which I think is also very troubling. We used to be at the frontier, a lot of these technologies.
Whoa. We didn't say that in Web3, though.
That we were the first
mass
best,
adoption
use case?
From the mass adoption from gaming?
Come on. I will leave that to the VCs in the comments sections to debate with you about. I think maybe yes and no. I mean, when you look at like the total value of tokens, how much of that is gaming tokens? When you look at wallets from Immutable versus wallets from other third party, I don't know. I think you could make the case that gaming actually has driven a lot of Web3 adoption.
I just made this argument like a few days ago. I agree that gaming makes sense as a Web3 tool for Web3 adoption, but that didn't create mass market adoption, right? It didn't accelerate adoption, but it's not creating some kind of mass market thing unless you're talking about the population of the Philippines and Southeast Asia. Yeah, then maybe we could talk about mass adoption.
We've done things on, I would argue, the supply side too, in terms of physics, haptic feedback. We've also taken wrong directions, but we've been at the forefront, right? We're at the forefront of cloud, I would argue, with a lot of the early streaming attempts. And I'm not talking about Stadia. I'm talking about OnLive. Remember OnLive? You know, rest in peace. But we're at the forefront of that innovation. We think about motion controls. You know, before the iPhone had gyroscope, we were fucking with motion controls for a long time, going back to the SNES. Subscriptions, you know, we're pretty early on in terms of consumer subscriptions. So even though we've been involved in failed bets, we've at least been on the frontier. And I think when you look at like the Cosmic Lounge case, I think that shows where there's a lot of limits in AI, at least from the supply side, which is that even if you make more levels and you make more content, that content is still part of an experience, and experience is driven by a designer. And so we basically have moved the problems in the supply chain down the funnel. So now we have a bunch of match 3 levels, but you need to hire more designers and you need to lay them out intelligently. Like you need to create an experience. And I think AI will eventually get to that point. But again, it hasn't happened. You know, we still are not at the forefront of this technology. And I'm surprised we haven't seen it more on the supply side, or we haven't seen it more on the consumer front facing side too. And I guess my message to the game industry would be like, let's get out there and ship fast and make sure that we're embarrassed by our first prototype. But it has to be more than just like AI chatbots if we're going to be at the forefront of AI. And I'm disappointed we haven't seen that be the case yet.
So you're saying like what is it, Love Girl? The weird 4X thing that you chat with an AI. That's not a messy prototype?
I think what that is very similar to what Eric Seifert had mentioned when he went over user acquisition AI milestones. And he goes through different milestones of how AI will be integrated and AI basically moving up the supply chain. I think that Top Girl game you mentioned is a part of his milestone framework, but I don't consider that a unique gaming implementation. I consider that a user acquisition strategy with AI, which is where the innovation has been to this point, has been Gen AI and ads.
Yep. And to your one point of Web3 making more progress in 26 months versus AI, what data points are you looking at?
In gaming. It's just a claim around, we have so much capital that's been floating around in Web3. They seem to be making more public shipments, more noise, more activity, more product in consumers' hands than I've seen from AI in gaming.
They raised in a frothy market. They've got a ton of that capital locked in. They're locked into Web3. So they've got to be vocal. They've got to be trying to do something. And AI has been exploding during a not so frothy market. Is that what's driving part of that? Like, I'm trying to get a sense of like what that 26-month really looks like.
I think that's totally fair, Adam. I think that if we thought AI was going to drive all this growth, I would expect the graph we're looking at right now, which is from Convoy Ventures, I would expect there to be an acceleration in gaming VC, right? And right now we're looking at nominal amounts for 2024. It's at some of its lowest amounts ever when it comes to venture capital raised for gaming.
Does this include B2B gaming, or is it all just gaming consumer service?
They do, in the Convoy report, they do talk about platforms. I can ask Jason over there if it is included in this specific chart. I would bet for now it is included, since they mention it later in the report.
Because like the one thing I'm thinking is what's pulling it down is obviously the status of the market. The other thing is I think AI right now is mostly impacting B2B, right? Like platforms and engines and tools.
I agree.
Right?
I completely agree.
So I would want to make sure that that's covered in this. And then because from my perspective, like if we're talking about the last 26 months, AI has made significantly more developments in the last 26 months versus Web3 companies. But that's from my perspective. Like I'd love to look at data to suggest one way or the other. But like there's that funnel, right? Of, okay, so at the beginning, you just have concept art, right? Like little things you can write documents better. You can do concept art. Then you've got marketing assets.
Call of Duty key art with 4 fingers or 5 fingers, whatever it was.
Then you have marketing assets, right? That are player facing, that are driving up. Like that is absolutely happening now. And then you're getting into the actual art production. And then you're getting into true AI first games. And yes, as you go down that funnel, that percentage goes down pretty quickly, right? But those are the different use cases. And that's how companies are going to be slowly moving between this funnel. And the speed at which AI growth has been happening is pretty astronomical. So maybe we're just not seeing it in these metrics, but at least from where I'm standing, like anecdotally, from like keeping my ear to the ground and talking with other companies that are doing this, like a lot of this stuff is happening under the hood of game companies.
Where have we seen this from a consumer facing or supply side perspective that we can point to? Because I get people are going into ChatGPT and pasting, code to have it being corrected, but where's the supply side or the consumer? Like, we're talking this beforehand.
And I'm saying,
why am I not seeing Apex Legends double characters or double cosmetics? Where are the games doing that are seeing these massive supply side increases? Like we were talking about this generative voices.
It's not doing that yet. It's not at the consumer facing side.
Yeah,
but I'm saying in the funnel steps before, it's growing pretty quickly, that you will eventually see that, but you're not going to see that yet.
But this is my disappointment, though, is that we used to be at the forefront of this stuff. Now we're just being dragged along by everyone else. We're at the receiving end. Now we're not at the front lines advancing this. Like we love to pride ourselves at being where art meets science. And yet this is the best we can do is like key art and text bots, chat bots, like another Nintendogs with AI in it. Like I would love to see game designers go ham on this. Like where are the game designers sitting down and be like, how can I make a whole game around this? And I know there are people that are taking like, let's for instance say like, being a GM and in Dungeons and Dragons. But I mean, like where are the real art meets science use cases of AI in games? This is what's disappointed me the most is we used to be at the forefront of this shit. We're not anymore. And don't be wrong, AI is going to do all the things that you mentioned, Adam. I agree. It's going to work its way through the funnel, but we're not special when it comes to AI. And we used to be special.